or checking it. Sign-in sheet. No, not the sign-in sheet. Making sure that it's actually running.
That's why I did both.
Oh. Oh, now you've taken on that job. Okay.
I'm the audio engineer that knows nothing about audio.
Usually what would happen is we get video, we lose sound, get sound, lose video.
Hence the audio engineer that's not an audio engineer. The person closest to the computer.
Don't they normally just throw us into the pit when it comes to the B-sides?
Yeah, I try staying from that pit. Because otherwise it's nails on a chalkboard and everything.
Okay.
I'll do other things, but I don't touch them.
All right. So thanks everybody for coming out. We're gonna get started here in a minute. Again, if you haven't been here before, we have this meeting every 2 weeks. Over the summertime, it's been a little bit flaky because we've had a lot of cancellations and stuff like that, but we're gonna try to get that back on track. For the next, I believe, month and a half, 2 months, we have actual talks assigned to individuals. So today is the 20th, so I believe the next one is going to be Christine and I are going to give a talk on diversity that we're working on. Should be pretty good. After that, we have Steve Alberts. I say that right? He's going to give a talk on how do you choose your next JavaScript framework, because there's like 1,000 choices. After that, we have okay, all right, cool. We're working. I thought someone's mocking me. All right, so then we're gonna have I believe there are two other ones. So there's a parsing C using Clang and Python, and Sam's gonna give that one. And then I believe we have another one on Swagger that's just not here yet that will go in there as well. And then I'll say that out loud. Yeah, I should. I'll have the backup talk of 20 years of experience versus 1 year of experience 20 times. That'll fill in the gap if we have a cancellation. I think we may actually also try to change the format a little bit. Maybe we'll have, instead of one long talk, we'll have two talks, half time. So that way, if something comes up, because we are at work, like you get called into a meeting or something else happens, then we don't have to cancel the whole session or scramble last minute. We can just have one talk instead of two. Hopefully, we won't run into a situation where both people have to cancel at the same time. So that's what we're going to do. But today, we're going to have Tess giving our talk, and Jim's the one that brought Tess to us, so we'll let Jim introduce her.
I met Tess 3 or 4 years ago at B-Sides. Worked for her at B-Sides. Good boss. The way I knew her through was she worked with the cryptos, and with B-Sides picked up. Okay, does anybody know what the B-Sides is? Charm or DC? Okay, you guys have all heard of DEF CON. DEF CON is what, 20,000 people?
Year 26, and it's kind of a sister conference to Black Hat. The same people run the same. They both run. And B-Sides evolved from there were just so many good talks, and they couldn't have space in front of all of them. So a gentleman named Jack Daniel came up with the idea to get the talks that didn't quite make the cut for the other conferences that were still good talks, and he created B-Sides, like B-Sides of a record, and that was kind of the other conference. And it originally was just in Las Vegas, but it kind of grew this organic type, hey, wherever you live, wherever you are, you can have a B-Sides. And if I knew I was going to say this, I would have checked the number, but there's probably a B-Sides in almost every state in the U.S., and they are all over. They're in South Africa, they're in Romania, they're in England, they're everywhere. And
So the DC started 6 years ago.
Yes, this is your 6th.
Yes, it is. I checked. I've been going to DC since day one. It is the second largest to Vegas.
And we have a kids' club.
And they picked up, well, that's where Chi really took over was the Kids Con. If you guys are into crypto, these are the last two crypto books, and I will send out the links with the notes so that you can be a beginner. Actually, what was the youngest kid that?
Anybody can play. I kind of wrote it because so many of the contests at DEF CON and other conferences, you really have to be kind of uber crypto nerd and really mathy, and a lot of them kind of preclude the average person from getting involved because you just look at it and you're like, there's no way. So I wanted to create something that everybody could do so that your kids could play, but the black badge guys would still get a chance. So I went with a choose your own adventure theme so that you could have something simple and easy that your grandma could do. And then all the way up to the hardest, black badge, make them weep in the hallways.
We got to tell them what a black badge is.
Oh, black badges typically are, if you win one of those, you get free admission to the conference for life. It's kind of a ninja badge.
So the DC one is in October, at the end of October. Like I said, it's the second largest outside of Vegas. And then 2 years later, Charm opened up, and they just had theirs in April. The closest was Columbia. The furthest was just Towson. Mm-hmm. So this woman is a library of knowledge, from security to operations to development. You and I have talked about almost everything.
Pretty much.
I mean, welcome, Tess.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And this is like my first time at NASA. When I was little, I actually wanted to work there. But that obviously didn't. But I'm kind of close today, right? We're going to pretend I made it.
You're in the building.
I'm in the building. Some people were asking about Raxacoricofallapatorius. For those who are not Doctor Who fans, this actually is the name of a planet that a specific alien type came from. There's a family called the Suave. They're kind of intergalactic criminals from Raxacoricofallapatorius. And in with the Ninth Doctor, there were 2 episodes, Aliens of London and World War III, where it turns out that they had infiltrated the British government, and they were like inside the British government officials. And so this is a picture of one of them like unzipping his head so he can climb out of his skin. And I thought it was kind of funny, kind of a parody on James Bond from Russia with Love, but it's more of an insider threat because these people were in the British Parliament and government, and they were completely inside the other, and they were hiding, and they were obviously up to no good shenanigans. It's just kind of a geeky little joke. So hopefully that's kind of how the whole thing's leave now. So for our agenda, do a little bit about me, talk about some history and current events, some definitions. We're going to go over some case studies, and if you have time, I'll get to some research. And then, of course, having had a master's degree, I have sources and citations for it. So I have about 20 years in security and law enforcement. I tell people I started out with bullets and blood because I was a forensics CSI person and have done crime scenes and dead bodies and autopsies and maggots and fingerprints and the whole deal. And I, at one point in my life, decided I would not really want to see or smell a lot of that again. And I recognized how critical technology was becoming in security. And part of my background with the police department was anti-terrorist operations. So I kind of started sliding over in that direction. And eventually I started working more in industrial security. And then I had a boss come into my office one day and say, I need classified systems. And I'm like, I work with that. He goes, no, I need them. I'm like, and that began my introduction to NISPOM Chapter 8. And suddenly a year later, I was an ISO, and then I became an ISM. And suddenly I ended up going to UMUC and getting my graduate work done in cybersecurity. And I remember at one point going, oh my gosh, do regular security people realize how tight this stuff is becoming? and do like all the IT people realize how important like physical and non-technical security still is. Like there was this big bridge I thought wasn't. I still don't think it is very efficient. But now I tell people I'm no longer bullets and blood, I'm in ones and zeros. I am currently with a startup, which explains why I'm the CISO and the FSO. I'm also the ITSPO, and that's the Insider Threat Program Senior Official, that if you're contracting, you have to have one of those signed. I'm also the configuration manager on our largest project. I'm also one of the information system security engineers on the same project, and I work on the IA packages, testing, scanning, all that to get us up on SIPR and JWIX. I don't know if you guys use that same stuff here, if you have something different. I'm not quite sure how NASA feeds into DoD or if it doesn't, but you probably heard those. My background with school, I have a bachelor's in sociology, which oddly enough has done me well in a security environment. Understanding how people think, why they think, how groups think, you know, things like that. It actually comes in handy a lot with insider threat, dealing with your people, and dealing with people who commit shenanigans on systems. I also have a master's in security management. I mentioned my grad work here in UC, and as he knows, I've always wanted to finish my bachelor's in physics, which is what I was doing before sociology. And I got the backup from my company and the time, and I'm going to go ahead and finish my second bachelor's in physics, because one of the other things I speak on is quantum computing. And I'm really fascinated with the security aspect of securing quantum systems. So I'm headed in that direction eventually, slowly.
Nice.
I do have a Security Plus. I have my certified hacker, certified network defense architect. Probably getting this next year. So that's just a little bit about me, kind of where I'm coming from. So one of the things that really kind of started to bother me when I heard people talk about insider threat was they all were kind of acting like it was this new thing, this new bad, like, oh, insider threat. And I'm like, y'all realize this is like not something new. This has kind of been an issue since the beginning of time. And, you know, they're suddenly acting like, oh, your security, you know, your security program should do this and this and that. And I would say repeatedly, like, you should have already been doing that. It's just like, y'all should have been doing this since day one. This is just like suddenly you should be. If you're not having already been doing this, you have been failing as a security professional, in my opinion. But there's a lot of people out there that haven't been doing it, and they're still trying to figure out what to do, which is a little frightening. But I like to share the history a little bit to kind of help remind people that this is not just, oh gosh, Manning, Snowden, suddenly we have this problem. No, we've had this problem for a very, 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 very long time, and I don't think it's going away soon. So we all are probably familiar with the story of Judas and him selling out Jesus for the 30 pieces of silver with this. That's an insider threat, right? He was betrayed by someone he trusted. Guy Fawkes, are we familiar with this is where the mask came from? A lot of people don't realize, they think it's from that movie V for Vendetta, but actually Guy Fawkes, this was 1605 gunpowder plot. They were going to try to assassinate King James of England. And they had packed the House of Lords, the basement, with gunpowder and left him to kind of watch over it. And he's kind of got busted red-handed. But again, this was people on the inside getting in and trying to bring down the government. Battle of Thermopylae. Anyone familiar with this one? Okay. So this is a neat one. This is Ephialtes of Trachis. And he sold his country out. The Greeks had set up, this was in the battle, 480 BCE. Okay, like, see how I'm saying, like, this is not a new thing? BCE, the Greeks had set up position near some cliffs, right? And the reason they had picked this position where the cliffs were kind of narrow together, and it was going to make the Persian army kind of single file through, and then they were just going to flank them off as they came out the other side, right? Well, Ephialtes decided to make a little cash off this, so he went and found the Persian army where they were camped out, gave them a download on what's going on, and he's like, you know what, if you want to give me a little cash, I can show you how to get around this. And he proceeded to show them how to outflank the Greek army and come up behind them. And didn't end well. And in that country, his name is still synonymous with traitor to this day. Just as in our country, I'm sure y'all have heard Benedict Arnold, right? That's how much he's still known in history as a traitor, which does take us to Mr. Arnold. Are we like, does everyone remember their American history? Okay. So for those who might not remember, Arnold was an American Revolutionary War general. He was in command of West Point during the war. And he was getting kind of, think about this, bitter and frustrated with how things were going. How many people work in an environment where they get bitter and frustrated, right? Okay. Again,
Too many people are laughing.
this is not new. This is not like, oh, in the last 10 years, suddenly people are getting bitter and frustrated. No, he was bitter and he was frustrated. And he felt like he was being recognized and nobody was listening to him. So he's like, well, forget it. I'm just going to go over to the British side. And he did. He made arrangements to, essentially when the British got to West Point, he was just going to hand it over to him. And Major John Andre, who was a British soldier, was actually caught on a train with the plans to surrender West Point, and they were able to let George Washington know in time, so it didn't happen. And then they went after Arnold, who, of course, stayed. Some people don't realize this, but he actually stayed in the country, fought on the British side. He led raids in Virginia and Connecticut, all the way up. And then, when the war was over, he retired to England and went there. But again, his name is synonymous with traitor in our country. Anyone know about Robert Ford? Anyone know this one? I like this one because if you've been to DEF CON, you know you got some of the guys there that are, you know, they feel like they're the little rebels. I don't have to worry about the insider threat. The insider threat, right? And I like to tell this story because I'm like, it don't matter how bad you are, someone can still get you, and you have to be careful. Jesse James, Robert Ford, case in point. So Robert Ford, this was in 1882, okay? So Robert Ford and his buddy Dick Liddell, they were arrested by a sheriff because Robert had shot one of Jesse James's cousins or something. And the sheriff was in a conundrum because, you know, he's an elected official. He hasn't gotten a handle on this whole Jesse James thing. He needs to do something. So essentially he goes to Robert Ford and says, look, technically you killed a guy. I should string you up for that. Well, we can make a little deal. If you take Jesse James out, I can make this all go away. So Robert Ford is, of course, like, dude, no problem. He goes to his brother Charlie, who happens to be in Jesse James' gang. He tells Charlie what's going on, and Charlie's like, all right, I got you, brother. They go to Jesse James, and he's like, hey, it's my brother. He wants to hang with us. You know, can he join? And Jesse James is like, sure, right? And so, of course, they were at like a boarding house, and they had breakfast, and they were all getting packed up so they could go rob their next thing. And while Jesse James was packing, Robert Ford walked up behind him and shot him in the head. Game over. So you can be a total bad guy. You can be Jesse James, but you still can have an insider threat in your own nefarious organization. And then, of course, who doesn't know Julius Caesar, right? Julius Caesar, Roman general, politician. He kind of scanned that into dictator for life. And the Senate was not cool with that because if you have a dictator for life, you don't need a Senate to do that. So they were allegedly concerned about the democracy. Chances are they're just more concerned about the jobs, right? But they decided to form a conspiracy, and they asked Brutus to join them. Now, Brutus was a good buddy of Caesar. He was like super tight with Caesar. Caesar had made him, was it governor of Gaul, I think? And they were really close. He was a confidant, member of his inner circle. He was like one of his good friends. But as happens sometimes when you get a lot of power, Caesar was being a pretty big douche to everyone. And he was even starting to be kind of like that to Brutus, and Brutus was kind of. So finally, the conspirators talked Brutus into joining the side. And they staged a gladiatorial event. Caesar was invited. They surrounded him. The stabbing begun. And by all accounts, Caesar initially fought back and tried to crawl away, but once he saw that Brutus was one of involved, he just kind of gave up. Now, here's a trivia question for those who like trivia. Et tu, Brute, actually, they think that was like actually never said. It was an invention of Shakespeare. So if you're ever playing trivia in a pub or something and you want to win a game, that was actually not something he really said. It was a Shakespearean invention. But let's get a little more current and modern. This is one of the stories I like to give people. I think in your day-to-day work, depending on what you work on and what you're siloed in, it's very easy to feel like what you're working on really isn't that important in the grand scheme. You know, I sometimes joke, like, you're not making rockets, but I can't really joke about that here. But there are a lot of times where you feel like something you have, like, what value is it? Like maybe a phone list, or, you know, maybe something you feel like, oh, everyone knows this, or this is just a little piece of the puzzle. What can I possibly do with it? Well, this is really interesting. If people have heard of Avery Dennison, like, have you ever bought labels for your Christmas cards? Like, Avery Dennison makes labels. Who in the world wants to steal anything from Avery Dennison? They make labels. They make, like, the sticky stuff on the back of Post-it notes. They make the diaper tape tabs on baby diapers. I'm sure everyone working at Avery Dennison is like, really, who wants this? Well, apparently somebody wanted it enough that they paid Dr. Lee about $160K to get it. So what happened was there's a lot of R&D and a lot of very valuable proprietary techniques in manufacturing, a lot of research involved, and that costs a lot of money. And of course, when you're doing that, you have to incorporate the cost of that into the price of the goods you sell, right? So if this company that convinced Dr. Lee to steal the stuff and hand it over could kind of leapfrog that, they could obviously go directly to market with a product price much lower, make a better profit, and outsell Avery Dennison. So this was huge. He was actually caught and convicted. But I like this as an example because if you're ever sitting there thinking about your work or think something you're doing and you're like, it can't be that important, someone stole sticky note adhesive. Whatever you're working on here has got to be at least as valuable, if not more, than sticky note adhesive, right? So keep that in mind. Quentin Tarantino, has anyone heard this story? So this actually happened right before I gave this talk that year. I went out and got updates on it last night because I'm not a Hollywood person, so I haven't really followed it afterwards, but I was curious. This was a couple years ago. So Quentin Tarantino had a script, and for those who were curious, at the time, no one knew what the script was when this happened, but it turns out it was the Hateful Eight script, and he had shown it to 6 people. And then, like 2 days later, it was all over the internet, and he was through the roof, and he was mad at everyone, and he was really mad because he'd shown it to friends that he trusted, and he told them not to show it to anyone. There it is on the internet, and he was furious at the time I gave the talk. And there have been more things since then. He did end up making the Hateful Eight. I think he changed some stuff in it, added a new ending. I did some research last night because I'm like, I don't know whatever happened with that. To this day, he claims he doesn't know who did it. He says he's narrowed it down to the 3 he thinks most likely to do it. Jimmy Kimmel thinks that it was Bruce Dern. But again, this goes to show this was not a rocket. This was not a fancy computer program. You know, this was a movie script, and someone was betrayed. So some definitions. Does anyone know the difference between industrial espionage and economic espionage?
Isn't industrial where you actually destroy something in the industry? For economic is you're showing something for your economic advantage.
So, am I not talking loud enough?
No,
Chill in my chair.
it's you. It's not you. It's you.
So industrial espionage typically refers to the theft of trade secrets. And it's typically done by competitors against each other. You know, like AT&T versus Verizon, right? So typically industrial espionage is like more business, competitive stealing back and forth. And then economic espionage is when it's done to specifically benefit a foreign government or a foreign agent. Where it gets shifty in the law is that, as we all know, in the US, there's a somewhat fine line between industry and government. However, in other countries, sometimes there is no line. So where you may have AT&T here, if you have like, you know, North Korean Telecom, that's not really a company. That's just for the government. So it's interesting to know that there are different definitions based on legal consequences, what acts can be used, how people can be prosecuted, you know, how they look at theft based on who took what, when, and why, where they took it, etc. When I started doing this research years ago, I was really trying to find a definitive definition for insider threat, and I couldn't find it. They were kind of all over the place. Some of them used the word spy, some of them used traitor. It was pretty sloppy. There was like really no like, this is the Merriam-Webster definition kind of thing. So I decided to create my own definitions. Spy is going to be someone where you don't necessarily have to have a pre-existing trust relationship. It can be there, but it's not required. Whereas a traitor, there has to be an established confidence to betray. Okay. And then with insider threat, it's important to understand, because I think there's a little piece of the puzzle that a lot of people don't talk about or don't focus on, is that it can be willful and malicious, or it can be ignorance and neglect. So this probably sums it up the best. You can have someone who has a malicious intent to do something bad to your project, or you can have someone who has maybe an ignorance of security practices and does something unintentional that still causes you a significant amount of damage, but it wasn't done maliciously. It was done because maybe security didn't train them right. You know, maybe they didn't go to enough places. So it's not always intentional, and people kind of leave that. I think a lot of times when you're getting talks or you're doing things, they leave out that oops aspect of insider threat. Now with the malicious insider, this is going to be somebody that has or has had authorized access and then abuses it or exceeds it, and you know, to negatively affect your organization. But keep in mind with insider threat, it doesn't have to be malicious in nature. Okay, and that's a huge component of when you're trying to secure your program. You want to make sure that not only do you deal with the bad guys that are trying to do bad things, but you also want to deal with people that are just clueless and may do things that cause you problems just out of sheer ignorance. You know, or you may have just the lazy people that don't want to bother. It doesn't necessarily mean it's malicious. It's just, you got to deal with those people. The honeypots. So, honeypots, we use this word a lot in networking stuff, but it's also an espionage sort of phrasing. Has anyone heard of Sharon Marie Scrammond? Okay, this one is for the ladies. Okay, and I say that because I have a top secret clearance, and I have gone through 20 years of briefings on various things, going to various places. And one of the things I've always found interesting was that every time I'm in a room and they're briefing us, they say to the guys, all right, guys, you know, if you're in a bar and there's a pretty lady and she's being nice to you, if that wouldn't happen at home, it doesn't mean suddenly you're magically attractive at this conference or at this. And I, you know, it's like, oh, everyone chuckles. It's okay. And then the next one, and I'm like, but they never say anything to the women. And so I have a good friend, FBI agent. He does a lot of counterintel briefs, and I like took him aside. I'm like, can I ask you a question? I'm like, I don't know if I should be flattered. Did you just think all us ladies are so together that we would never fall for any of that nonsense? So you didn't bother to tell us because you just know we ain't falling for that. Or if you just in your heads just don't think we're being targeted, you know? And he's like, you know, that's a really good point. And I'm like, there are a lot of women out there, you know, and she's a fantastic example, and we're going to talk about her. there's a lot of women out there, and I do this one for the ladies, because you need to know that you can be targeted too by those devil boys. And you need to be just as careful as boys. Okay? So this occurred in Ghana in the 1980s. Okay? And this is just a kind of a little history of Ghana. Nothing, you don't have to commit any of this to memory. They were kind of established and controlled by the British. Then they decided, we're not going to be British anymore. We're going to be our own country. So, you know, whenever any country does that, then they all fight about who gets to be in charge, right? This is history 101. Everyone's fighting about who's in charge. Finally, this one guy steps up. He's the one name you need to remember from this, Jerry John Rawlings. So he steps up. He's like, I'm in charge now. No more constitution. No more political parties. Everyone do what I say. Let's go. Okay. Right? Good. That's how this ends. So Jerry John Rawlings, remember his name. Now, Cheryl Marie Scranage was a CIA employee. She'd been one for 7 years. She was an operations support assistant, and by all accounts, she was a good girl. She was not a bad person. Okay, she was a good girl. She was a cheerleader. She was shy. She went to church. She sang in the choir. She'd never been in any trouble. When people ask, they refer to it as being very naive. She was a good girl, right? So what happened? Exactly. So there was a gentleman named, well, I don't know if we should call him a gentleman. There was a guy named Michael Seduced, and that's what happened to her. So Michael Seduced was the nephew of Jerry John Rawlings, right? And he was assigned to seduce Sharon when she was stationed in Ghana, and try to get as much information as he could out of her. And so then he took that information to the chief of Ghanaian counterintelligence, and then that guy pretty much passed it to everyone. KGB, the entire Soviet bloc, East Germany, Libya, Cuba. And you're probably like, okay, how is this relevant? Well, it's relevant because Ghana was fairly capitalistic with their economics, but their foreign policy was very leftist. And so they were really trying to cozy up to like Castro in Cuba. They were trying to get all in with Daniel Ortega over in Nicaragua. So they were like using all this stuff to be like, hey, let's be friends. I got some stuff for you, right? You know how that works. And it was working. So how was she caught? Well, there was an inspection team that had come in to inspect the facility, and she was really nice and invited them over to dinner to her house. And apparently to go to the restroom in her house, you have to walk past her bedroom. And there was a picture taped to her nightstand of Mr. Seduced, and he was, let's just say, not wearing a lot of clothing in the picture, and he was like draped on the bed with a sheet over some strategic bits, and let's just say it was pretty obvious what was going on by the picture. And so they said to her, like, Sharon, you can't do this, you need to stop. She was like, touched it. Now, the inspection team came back. I want to say it was a division of CIA called SAD, Special Activities Division, and their job was to investigate the relationships between agents or staff and foreign nationals, because it was fairly common if you're stationed outside the U.S. to date someone. I mean, it wasn't a big thing, and they weren't really worried about it. They were like, yeah, it kind of happens all the time, and the inspection team was like, well, we should bring her back and polygraph her. And SAD was like, she's going to be back soon anyway because we're getting ready to station her to Calcutta. So we'll just So they brought her back and they sat her down with poly. And there was a question that they hit that she just, that's what took her down. And the question was, have you ever given classified information to anyone? And she just couldn't get that one down. And I think 4 days of interrogation, she eventually confessed. So she confessed all the stuff that she'd given. She had given them the names of all the people the U.S. thought were KGB agents, the plans for the coup against the government. She'd given patients' data, information on military equipment that Libya and some of those other countries had wanted, and names of a lot of the people that were helping the CIA. Okay, And she ended up pleading guilty to 3 of the 18 charges. And I think the reason why she didn't get a harsher thing was that she helped them get it. And the way they did that was he came over to Springfield, Virginia, and agreed to meet her at a hotel. And they think that they were continuing to cultivate that relationship because their thoughts were when she gets to Calcutta, she's going to be in a new office with access to new information, and we'll get that stuff too. So they were continuing the relationship. So he came over to see her, and that's where he got busted. He was arrested and pled no contest. They sentenced him to 20 years, but ended up letting him go because they exchanged him for all of the Ghanaians that had been. Okay, so they had actually, when they get the information, they had rounded them up. I think one of them was killed. And this is just an example. There was like a guy who was telegraphed, the police takes some wiretaps. So in exchange for getting Seduced back, the Ghanaians pretty much gave him everyone. And I think the U.S. World News reports that it cost about $13 million to relocate every one of them to the U.S. and give them a life. But they got them out in exchange for giving them back. So why did this happen? Well, there was some background with Ms. Schrodinger. First of all, she's a Black woman in the 80s in a predominantly white male CIA division. Okay? I'm pretty sure they weren't inviting her to tea or to play tennis. So she was fairly isolated if you think about it, right? She probably didn't have lots of friendships, pretty good support structure. She didn't have any ladies to hang out with and go shopping in Ghana. You know, she was fairly isolated. So it probably would have been fairly easy for this suave, handsome gentleman to just slide all up next to her and be like, hey, baby, you know, right? She's thousands of miles from home. She had been married and had gotten out of that marriage, but the marriage had been pretty bad. Her ex-husband was pretty unkind to her. So, of course, again, you've got some handsome guy turning on the charm, making you feel good, especially after getting out of a bad relationship. It's very easy to see how we could have cozied up, right? Especially if she's in an environment where she doesn't have a lot of office friends or people to hang out with, or, you know, and this is why this is fantastic, getting everyone here together, you know, because this can actually help any one of you. If you start going through a rough time and you have people that you actually feel comfortable talking to because you've sat and eaten pizza with them, it gives you an opportunity to build some relationships, which she probably did not have in the 80s back then, okay? And again, I'm not excusing anything she did, but from a security perspective and a security manager perspective, it's easy to see that she was vulnerable, right? Being manipulated. She claims it started with him just asking, and then when she was kind of hesitant about it, he kind of tried to break up with her, so she got him a little bit, and then once the tap was open, he stopped being. She claims that he threatened her with a gun if she stopped. She claims that he said he would come and shoot everybody at the office. She didn't bring information. It's impossible to know how true any of that was, but they do think it was fairly true based on the questioning and based on the fact that she was very eager to get him arrested, so she would feel safe not having him out roaming the world looking for him. So again, we talk about the guys all the time, right? You know, being vulnerable to the bombshell that comes in and slides into your lap. But remember, all of us, like, women are people too, and we can have bad days, and we can be vulnerable, and we need to make sure that we don't just focus on the bombshell sitting in the lap. We need to look at the ladies, and we need to make sure that the bombshell's not sitting in their lap, right? So this one, I think, is important because it really does kind of bring that home. And as an organization, you also want to think about how do you support a staff member that may be going through that. You know, if she had had a good support system and had had friendships, she might not have been as vulnerable to this fly guy sneaking all up on her, right? She might have actually seen that more for what it was because she had a support system in place and she could see that, but she couldn't. So, kind of to summarize, the big red flags were that the lover was the cousin of the president, and she did lie about any relationship with him. And the reason this case was important was, I think it had brought about this Intelligence Identities Protection Act because of all the people that were compromised when she shared that information. And then the polygraph actually helped break the case. Like, they were not worried about it. And the only thing that got her was that polygraph. If they hadn't done that polygraph, probably never would have got her. All right. This is a fun one. We're going to play a little game. So I'm going to tell you a story, and I want you to tell me if you think this is an insider threat. Okay? So, you're working in a big facility like NASA, right? And there's a lot of sensitive stuff going on here. People have been trying to get to it for years. We all know this. This is not a huge secret, right? Your security manager here and making sure things stay. And suddenly, one day, a delegation of foreign scientists shows up in your lobby, unannounced, for a meeting that you're not aware of and has never been done. They're all just standing in your lobby all the time. Then, one of your staff members going through the lobby sees these guys and goes, "Hey, how are you doing?" And apparently he's good friends with some of them. So you call in the people that do the forensic testing because you're a little concerned now. This is a little off. Please tell me your security folks brief you on form. Maybe you shouldn't tell me if they don't. But you know this is like something that has to be planned and it has to be paperwork done.
60 days.
People can't just show up out of nowhere. This is not a good thing. So your tech guys are looking at the computer and they go, "You know that network you got over here that like nothing's supposed to leave that network? He's backing it all up on the tapes. Did you know this?" And you go, "Okay, no, I did not know this. This is not a thing." So you go to him and you take this away from him. You say, "You know what? We don't want to be, we don't want to be mean. So we're not gonna like throw the book at you. We just kind of need to see what's going on here. So just kind of pause, time out. We need you to kind of step back from the program, have a seat over here. You're not fired, taking your pay away, not punishing you. Just need to pause and figure out what's going on." So you have him go sit in another room. You take his access away from the network. You're like, "All right, we're good, right?" So while you're investigating this, he goes over to the building across campus to his buddy and proceeds to start downloading all the stuff that you just took away. Any red flags going off?
Isn't that what Snowden did?
As a security person, is this like a little bit of concern here, right? So, and then while you're doing all this, you find out coincidentally that about 8 years ago, he was questioned by federal investigators because he was caught on a wiretap with another guy that just got busted for economic espionage. All right? Who is this? Has anyone heard of this guy? Do we know him? Mr. Wenho Lee. So Mr. Wenho Lee was with Los Alamos National Lab. And his job was to create simulations of nuclear explosions so that they could study them and use that to improve the U.S. arsenal. So in March of '99, he was fired from Los Alamos for failure to maintain classified information securely. And bizarrely enough, that exact same day, the New York Times posted this enormous giant story. No one knows where the New York Times got it. But it was very coincidental, the same day, right? In December of '99, a federal grand jury indicted him for stealing U.S. nuclear arsenal secrets and giving them to the People's Republic of China. However, in September of 2000, the judge said that if it went to trial, everything had to be made public. So, of course, Janet Reno and Louis Freeh are all like, "Oh." So they had to plea. They had to do a plea because you can't put all that out in public, right? So there was a plea deal. Part of the plea deal was he had to tell him where the backup tapes were. You know what he told him?
Destroyed him.
I destroyed him. It's all good. Don't worry. They're good. All right. So then in 2006, he ends up settling a $1.6 million lawsuit against the U.S. government and 5 major media outlets for deriving the name. Okay. So the question is, was he an insider threat?
Yes. Taking classified information.
The answer is yes. Regardless of whether someone's convicted, indicted, I mean, pretty smart people. They're really still working here at NASA. You know how to know when you got threat. Even if the threat does not get as far as with Benedict Arnold, we never turned over West Point. That doesn't mean he still wasn't a threat. Now, apparently all this information did go to people who loved China, but the mere fact that someone was not actually convicted does not necessarily mean they were not a threat and they did not. I think his story is really interesting because there's a lot of argument that he uses the fact that it never went to trial as proof of his innocence. So I think it's.
Would today be a military trial? Would they turn it into
Well, I don't think they could because he was still
national security?
But you still can't do a military trial. At least you can't, as far as I last know. But I want to talk about my favorite guy in the world. Okay? This guy, there's just a thing I have for this man. Because everything he stole was hard copy. Alright? It is so easy. You can put everything on it. Hard drive, USB stick, email it now. This dude, everything he took was hard copy. Okay? And I've seen pictures of his house when they went through it. Just respect for the fact that he managed to steal that much stuff. It's phenomenal, right? His name was Greg Chung, Boeing stress analyst, very high level clearance. He was found during the investigation of Chi Mok. Have you heard of him? Chi Mok is the one they usually focus on in their briefing cards. Chi Mok was a naturalized U.S. citizen. He was an engineer with Power Paragon, which is a division of Alpha. He was found guilty in 2007 of conspiring to export sensitive defense to China. And while they were going through Chi Mok's house and stuff, they found letters from handlers talking about another guy named Greg. And basically letters like, we know you don't have access to this. Can you see if Greg can get it for us? And they're like, who is Greg? Right? So they finally figured out who Greg was and started watching his house, right, and doing surveillance. And because it was pretty public knowledge that Chi Mok was in trouble, he got caught. Greg was starting to get a little nervous. So he starts trying to get rid of this stuff by slipping the individual pages of classified information into newspapers, right? Like slowly, when you find out what he had, you're just like, really, you thought you were going to throw it all away. But they did 5 searches of his trash between August and September of 2006, and in every single trash thing they found, everything. He ended up, I think when they looked at it, he had stolen over 300,000 sensitive documents. And that's not pages, that's documents with multiple pages. And I saw the video walkthrough of his basement. Y'all ever see Indiana Jones? The one at the end where the dude's walking down the thing with the box on the thing and there's shelves and all that. This basement was like stacks of paper just everywhere. And you're just looking at it going, he stole all that. Like he's walked out with it. Seriously. It just to see, I tried to get pictures and I can't. I think the pictures are not something to share. But if you ever get a chance to go to one of the briefings where they show the pictures, it is stunning how much he sold. So the other wonderful thing he did, and being in the police and I have background investigations, so he kept a journal. Everything he did. Literally. Who he talked to, when he talked to them, what they wanted, what he stole, when he gave. I mean, he like pretty much wrote the report for it. It was fantastic. I mean, it was beautiful. This is like my favorite guy. Just maybe I'll shake his hand. But at one point, and this is what I thought was really neat, at one point when they looked at everything he had the largest repository of space shuttle data in the world.
That's what
in the world. In his basement.
You're talking the shuttle, an F-15.
The largest repository. He had more in one place than even the people that were building it. Sorry, pardon my French, but it boggles the mind. So they also found these tasking lists, literally like grocery lists for him. Hey, Greg, this is what we need. Can you get this for us? And he'd go off and get everything and send it back. And then in Chimok's home, this is kind of an example of one of the things they found, the urgent need for, and then they requested this stuff because they knew that Chimok didn't have access to it. Like, hey, ask Greg if they can get this for us. That's but they literally just found like grocery lists, like, you know, bread, eggs, milk, and sent for so stealing sensitive information. This happened 70s and 2006. Again, they actually discovered him while investigating Chimok, and he had been lying about the exchange scholar relationship he had with the gentleman in China. He's the university professor who to give to the government, and he also lied about it. But this was important. This was the U.S.'s first economic espionage trial. And again, just if you ever get to see pictures of what this man stole, it's just like, I'm sorry, but you know, okay, put such stuff on the CD, whatever. But when you're like, dude, you need like 6 U-Hauls to get that stuff out of it. That was just fun.
But how? I mean, you're talking space shuttle. You're talking F-15, B-1 bomber.
You know what? This is a good point. I'm glad you said that. So one of the things I tell people, and what we're supposed to say is, if someone's coming to you and asking you about something that they have no need to know, bing, 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 okay? Because one of the interesting statistics is when they bust a lot of these spies with stuff, the stuff they have is not stuff they're working on. So if you have someone that's all like, hey, dude, there's a reason we have need to know, okay? And if someone's really starting to push that with you or trying to ask about stuff that they really have no need to know about, they shouldn't be asking you about, that's a red flag. It may not mean that they're a terrible person, they just could be very nosy. But putting it together with a lot of other stuff, that is something you need to be aware of. If someone's just starting to get like really nosy, and that's exactly, he didn't work on all that, right? But he just went on. So I'm glad you brought that.
So when Andre's like, hey, you should all come in and talk about your current project.
Come on, man.
No, he's still asking for the GitHub repository.
Yeah, I'm allergic to jail. Don't bring that up.
We have our spy who couldn't spell. And I use this story with my daughter to reinforce why she needs to learn how to spell so NSA doesn't give her a crappy nickname. Because legit, they called this guy. That was his name. Wasn't something cool like the Panther. He was the guy. Right. Okay. Brian Patrick Regan, not Canadian. He was a former Air Force Master Sergeant, father of 4. He is trained in cryptoanalysis by the U.S. Air Force. And he was assigned to the NRO in Chantilly. He was a signals intelligence specialist. So towards the end of his 20-year, I think there was like a 20-year service limit on his rank, and he was getting towards the end. He was $117,000 in debt, and he had 4 kids. You know, this would keep anyone awake at night, probably. So he did what all of us would do, right? He wrote a letter to Saddam Hussein. And he's like, Saddam, there's stuff you might want. I'll give it to you for 13 minutes. Right? And he also, because, you know, he wasn't, like, they hadn't really met at a cocktail party yet, so he wasn't super confident in the relationship. So he sent letters to, like, Libya and Cuba and a bunch of other places, too, right? So we had a foreign intel source in one of these locations that received one of the letters who saw the letter and came to us and went, you got a dude like trying to shop some stuff around. Did you know this? And so they were trying to figure out who it was. And the only thing they had were that the letters were full of like really terrible misspelling, right? I mean, they were really bad. Like, I think one of them was, instead of saying like espionage, he was like espionage, stuff like that. So they literally were hunting this guy down based on trying to find the worst spellers. Like, seriously. So in 2001, he was arrested by the FBI at Dulles. He was on a plane headed to Zurich. He had actually told his boss he was going to Disneyland with the kids and the wife. He lied. But when they caught him, he had classified documents and contact information with him, but he was also carrying a folder containing 4 pages filled with 3-digit numbers. In his right shoe, he had contact information for the Iraqi, Libyan, and Chinese embassies. In his trouser pocket, they found a spiral pad with all these words on it. 26 words on an index card, and then in his wallet, they found a piece of paper with a string of several dozen letters in it, right? So, I like this guy because it kind of pulls the crypto in. So on a Post-it note in his wallet, they found hand tree, hand call. Can anyone figure out what that means? And don't feel bad because NSA couldn't figure it out, right? Now, to be fair, they had 911 just happen. And they had a little stuff going on. So this dude at the airport with some crap in his pocket was not big on the radar. But they couldn't figure this out. So this FBI analyst, is Daniel Olson? He was working on it. And one of the big issues was the reason his spelling was so bad is he was dyslexic. And so he had been doing some research on dyslexia, and he found that they had this trick they did to remember things without transposing them. So instead of using numbers, they would use words, right? And the words would correspond to a meaning or a thing, like a number. So if you think of hand, tree, and car, 5, 1, 5, 4 wheels on a car, right? So that was kind of the little mnemonic thing. And they found this one near his Ameritrade account card in his wallet. So they gave it a try, and it turned out to be the PIN number to his Ameritrade account. And then they went through some other stuff and found, like, they kind of applied this and they figured out, like, latitude of Chinese missile sites, all sorts of good stuff. And in his wallet, they had a Caesar cipher. He apparently had been like really into that movie with Hannibal Lecter, the Manhunt movie, where the Tooth Fairy guy like left code using a book code, and he used the book code.
I have that salt and pepper stuff.
Do you?
Yeah, it's a rocket ship. The pepper is the rocket ship.
That is really cool. It's like a grinder.
Yeah.
What if they sell that at the gas shop?
You've just been taking pictures of my house.
I'll call you next time. So this is a copy of one of the pages, right? His complex encryption scheme. Can't talk today. They didn't have a key, so they were really struggling. And so finally he decided to help out because he's kind of bored sitting in jail. So apparently there were 19 caches where he had originally been like hoarding all this classified stuff in a locker at NRO, but then he decides to like stick it in garbage bags and bury it in the woods. Now, in case your security manager has not told you, a garbage bag buried in the woods is not authorized storage for classified information. First mistake, or maybe not first. There were 12 in Virginia in Pocahontas State Park, and I think there were 7 in Maryland at Pasco Valley State Park. He used the NRO phone list as book code for the ones he buried in Virginia, and then he used his junior high school yearbook for the ones in Maryland. But he also said he was a little worried he might forget stuff, so that if they went on to 95, exit 12A, walked up the ramp, and dug up the toothbrush container he buried, everything was in a text. Yeah, every time I pass that exit, I'm like, where was that toothbrush container buried? And then what he'd done is he'd marked the trees with roofing nails so that he knew which trees that he'd buried the bags by. So they all went out and looked for the bag. So this kind of just shows you like what they caught him with and then what it turned out to be. And this one I thought was pretty significant because the prosecutor sought the death penalty for the first time since the Rosenbergs for him. That was pretty good. So, there are consequences. Very classified in the woods. So a little research, I want to screen through this really quick. Some interesting research that's come about. One of the things I thought was really interesting, and I haven't really done a lot of additional stuff to see where they're at with it, but there's a company in Veritas where they have come up with this kind of helmet that they can put on somebody that can read their brain reaction. And instead of using a polygraph where they like ask you a question, you have to give an answer and you actually have to lie to register on the machine, they figured out that they can show you pictures of things. And your brain will register a familiarity with it before you could stop it. I mean, it happens so fast, you really can't control it. And so what they could do is, let's say they have a guy who wants to be embedded with our Marines over there, be a guide. They could put this helmet on him, and then they could show him pictures of something he should not know about unless they know he's associated with the bad guy, like maybe a hideout or a face of someone, a contact. And if he registers on that, doesn't matter if he lies or not, he's got a familiarity with this thing that he should not, and then they can actually use that. Maybe you don't need to be embedded with it. And at the time that I did the research on it, it was like 80 to 90% accuracy, which I thought was kind of neat. But that's one of the methods they've looked at. This one's really neat. Anyone currently in school, you have to use Turnitin? When I did my master's degree, you had to use this thing called Turnitin. And essentially, back when I did my first degrees, you wrote everything in pencil. Like, you got extra credit if you typed. That's how old I am. But now they have this thing where you type your paper up, and then before you turn it into your professor, you run it through this site called Turnitin. And it essentially compares your paper to the internet and pretty much everything written. And then it comes back with a primary source thing. So it'll take like something you've written, and it can show you like, oh, like 26% of this is from here. And it can actually give you, obviously, there are only some unique combinations of words, but it really kind of helps to prove that you did your own work and that you didn't
part
just
of the reason was to check against the term, though.
Well, that too, but essentially you have to turn your report in so that your teacher can look at it and you can kind of show like, hey, I didn't just cut and paste this from Wikipedia, like I actually wrote my paper. But you actually have to turn the report in with your paper to the teacher to get your grade. So, but what the people doing this had come up with this way where you take the same idea, right? And so your emails, your team, you can run all the emails that leave your team through a filter. And you can set a threshold for comparison against like maybe a database of proprietary or phrasing or maybe equations or something. And then what happens is the filter will read the email or read the attachments and compare it against this proprietary database. And you can set a threshold and basically say, hey, if something goes out of here that looks like they're like sending documents, alert me. And you can even set it so that it will actually completely stop email. It will not allow it to leave. So that, you know, because now it's like, you don't have to be like our buddy Greg and like stick it all in your pants and walk out with it. You can just email it to your house or to, you know, to your own account. And you have to leave the building with it. So it doesn't, you can walk out all cool. You just email it all to yourself. Well, this is a way that they can kind of help alleviate that as being a vulnerability. So they can run it through that filter. And if anything looks weird, they can, you know, grab it. Has anyone heard of stochastic forensics? Okay. This is like the paper I struggled through. It's pretty high level math. I'm not there yet. But the gist of it is this. When you're sitting down and you're doing your daily work, there's pretty much kind of a pattern to your work, right? You do certain things, you do them kind of in a certain rhythm. When you just start like moving mass amounts of data, that's kind of an anomaly blip on your regular day-to-day pattern. So this isn't really kind of an evidentiary thing to use in court, but it could be kind of an indicator type thing. If you have a concern, like let's say we know someone's going to be leaving the team. They've taken another job, they've said their goodbyes, they've got 2 weeks left. As a systems admin or, you know, scraper, I could kind of watch and be like, well, wait a minute. for the last 12 years, this is what their pattern's been, and now all of a sudden, mass amounts of data are suddenly getting sent. This could be an issue, right? Or mass amounts of data are being copied onto hard drive. You know, this is something I may need to into. So the stochastic forensics, interesting field, and it's if you can do the math, it's a good paper, but it was I was able to get the meat of it, but it was a lot of proof in it as to why it showed those trends.
That based on like machine learning, that sort of thing, or it's detecting your pattern based on the machine learning, and then detecting anomalies based on that.
Right.
And we had interns last year that gave a talk on that, running logs through something similar to that.
They're looking at that too for using for malware.
Yeah.
And so, overview of 5 critical pathway components. This is a semantic white paper. Essentially, they're a big thing, and they kind of put it in this pyramid setup where, as a security manager or something, you have to kind of look at it from a funnel. It's not that every single person is going to do something bad. And you're gonna have groups of people that are gonna have personal predispositions to kind of act in one way or another. But even if they have a predisposition to be a threat, it doesn't necessarily mean they are. So then you have to add stressors on top, because you could have someone that hates NASA, hates it with the passion of 1,000 suns, will never actually do it, except complain about how much they hate it. They're just going to stop there, because all they really want to do. But then you add a stressor on top of that person. Well, maybe now we've kind of funneled down a little, right? And then you might start seeing some concerning behaviors, you know, like monthly trips to China. And it kind of takes you up into this pyramid where you may have like 100 people, and all 100 people may have a personal predisposition to kind of go in that direction, but you're not going to have all but maybe a very narrow amount out of that big group. They're actually going to go all the way down that pathway. One new thing I did want to mention, and this was something interesting. I was in a talk a couple of months ago with the head of Insider Threat for DoD, the head of Insider Threat for State Department, a guy from Carnegie Mellon, and the lead investigator on the Manning case. And they were talking about some new stuff they're doing. They've got some research they have Berkeley doing. But one of the big things they're seeing is it kind of used to be a big trend where money was kind of a big motivator, you know? And now they're seeing with the whole social media thing, there's new stuff happening. Like trends are not trending the same now. There's a lot of people that are kind of looking for that like 15 minutes of fame kind of thing.
You were home.
Oh, yeah, exactly. There was just that whole like thing that it's feeding into that need for attention. And one of the questions I asked the DoD guy was, you know, could you consider having a really good kind of award, but some sort of acknowledgement program in your company? Make sure that you are rewarding people and you're giving them attention for the good work and the acknowledgement, accolades, so that they feel less like they have to go get it from you. Now, maybe that wouldn't solve all the problems, but you think about how often as, you know, management is just like, just get it done. Just do your job. But they're not like the care and feeding of your staff kind of thing. And they did say that that is one of the things they're having Berkeley look at is, you know, perhaps with this newer generation, the I generation, whatever it's called now, but looking at would that help some of these people that may be predispositioned to behave in a negative way to get the attention, if you're giving them proper attention, kind of mitigating that a little bit. So that's something apparently they're working on. This was an interesting thing on personality disorders. The big net from this was narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, along with borderline personality, seem to be the 3 personnel security risks, like the highest ones when you're looking at people who've already done stuff and doing the back work on it. Those 3 disorders tended to be the ones that you found most often when you had someone who'd done something. Communication awareness, I think I've mentioned this a couple times. Organizational factors, you want to look at the availability and ease at which people can get to information. Critical, and that is proprietary or even sensitive stuff you don't want to get. Access privileges, these are super important. I showed it today, I had a cat. I could have probably found a little snip down there at the guardhouse. Yeah, that's not how security works. I have absolutely no need to be in here without my escort. But I've seen people argue that. I'm like, you need to just let people do their job, you know, and you have to respect access privileges. And I think even within this room, like I know I have my sysadmins and I have my dads, and I know we weekly have a boxing match about access privileges and rights on this server, that VM, this, I should be able to do this, you can't do that, and I can't, you know. But respect access privileges. They are not there because someone thinks you are a bad. They are there because we need to have a policy to protect us from that one person that decides to do it. Okay, so try to respect access privileges when you encounter them. They're there for a reason, and it's not personal against you. Okay, markings are important. You want to make sure your stuff's marked so people know what needs to be protected and how. You also want to look at how easy is it for people to get stuff out of your place, right? Undefined policies about working from home. Anytime someone works from home, suddenly information's going back and forth, or it's leaving the building with them to go home on their laptop or what have you. And then if you have no consequences for any egregious behavior, you're just basically telling them, yeah, you can do it. You're not going to get in trouble for it. And then also time pressure, like really stressing people out. When you looked at the stressors, when you add additional stress to the way you treat your employees, you need to kind of be careful with that. Be respectful to them and don't put them in positions where they're just against them. And then lack of training, that's a huge thing. You know, we get so caught up, trust me, I get it. I get the, you saw all the hats I wear. But I always try to make sure that I take the time to talk to people, to help them understand, to drive all the way over here and talk to everyone here, because I'm so passionate about this. It is so important to help people. To take that 5 minutes out. If someone is complaining about an access privilege or complaining about a security procedure, it's like, hey, do you understand why we're doing it? You know, because sometimes just explaining to someone why that's in place makes them go, oh, I didn't know. You know, I had one lady who was really mad about something, and I kind of explained to her why we did that. And she's like, I'm going to start doing that at home too. Boom. I mean, she got it because someone took 5 minutes to explain to her instead of just making her day inconvenient, right? And what can we do? We want to provide non-threatening, convenient ways for employees to report suspicions. You want to make your folks feel comfortable talking to you, that what they bring to you is confidential. You know, a lot of people don't want to say something because they're afraid, like, well, I don't want to get that person in trouble. You know what? Show them that you have the kind of integrity that they can bring something to you. You can look at it, you know, confidentially, check into it, and, you know, have them trust you that they can bring things even if they're not sure. You do want to monitor your computer networks. That's a given, and I'm sure your security folks are doing that. Make sure your security personnel have what they need. That's why I ask their managers in here. You know, they're struggling too, and they usually get like the least of the budget. Protect your intellectual property. Make sure you even know what it is. Screen your new employees. That's a huge one. I'm sure y'all do a pretty good job of that here. And then your exit process. Really watch that. They say that most of the time when people start stealing stuff, it's usually after they've given them. So now, I don't know if this next slide is accurate. Correct me if it is wrong, but I tried to get NASA specific stuff for you. There is a counterintelligence note out for you guys. I obviously do not have access to it because I'm not NASA, but that's what it's called. It's on y'all's website. And if any of you here have issues or concerns or want to report something, according to your website, these are the people you need to go to. So, I don't, hopefully that's not 83 years old.
So the primary method to contact or report anything like that, and in fact, generally speaking, not just IT related, with the exception of clear building issues that your building manager with, you want to email soc@nasa.gov, SOC, Security Operations Center. They're the people who email you and remind you not to fall victim to phishing emails, and ask you to email them a copy or a actual attachment of the email itself to them for analysis if you get one. They're those guys. They do all the forensic stuff. They take care of the big issues. So
and do know your people. So probably maybe in your next meeting, say, hey, if you have this problem, you talk to these people. This is like, make sure you know who to go to.
So if you guys know any security people, I think this group has been established for like 5 years, and for 5 years I've been trying to invite security people to come talk to us, and we're roughly we're at 0. All the security people that have come in, it's been a struggle. All the security people that came and talked to us have all been from external sources.
What do you want?
Well, no, what are you looking for? Because I know FSA and stuff.
Yeah, let's talk after.
You know,
Let you finish your thing.
He just doesn't know it.
Yeah, I know.
So anyway, that's pretty much it. Questions if anyone has them. I think I can send you the presentation if you want. I've got the books at the end, and then I've got like all my sources and citations.
I love her.
Yeah. Thank you, Tess. Has everybody signed the sign-in sheet?
Except for me.
I signed you up. I signed you up early. Yeah. Have you ever heard of Trunk Monkey? Yes, I'm going to send you a link. It's a security podcast. They gave a story about what do they call it? Pen testers.
Penetration testers.
Penetration testers. Like they were physical penetration testers.
Yeah.
And there's a story about this one incident where it was so egregious that they were like, I don't want to give it away. It's you will love it.
Has he seen the stuff from Jason's Street?
I don't know.
You guys should show that Breaking in Bad video.